So the time has come where I would like to welcome my brother and friend, Robert Suttle, to deliver us our keynote for this Faith Pre-Conference. Robert Suttle is a consultant and expert advisor confronting critical issues such as HIV criminalization, stigma, and discrimination, with a focus on equity and social justice. Robert chairs the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation Council of Justice Leaders and is a global advisory panel member of the HIV Justice Network. He is also a co-founder of the Cero Project. Additionally, Robert authored the foreword for Alexander McClelland's book, Criminalize Lives, HIV, and Legal Violence. Please help me in welcoming Robert Suttle, our keynote speaker.
Oh, good evening or afternoon, everyone. I just want to be transparent and say I am a little tired right now and a little nervous, but I am so full at the same time because I have truly enjoyed being here today. Actually, two things are going on in this whole building, but I've been with you all most of today because it just drew me. And so it is indeed an honor and a privilege to stand here today for so many reasons. I want to express my gratitude to the U.S. HIV/AIDS Faith Coalition for inviting me to be a part of this important event. I have notes here, so I'm going to use them to keep me on track, so just bear with me. It is truly a privilege to be here at the USCHA Interfaith Pre-Conference, focusing on moving faith forward in the South to end the epidemic. This theme holds great significance for me as a person of faith and as a committed advocate involved in movement-based advocacy for racial, social, and health justice and equity in the HIV community. Faith has been my anchor through some of the most challenging moments of my life. It has been a guiding light, a shelter in the time of storm, all the things, offering me hope, strength, and resilience, especially when I faced the initial shock and adjustment to my HIV diagnosis at the age of 24. Today, I address you not only as a long-term survivor, but as a witness to the damaging impact of criminalizing HIV. I am dedicated to putting an end to these discriminatory laws that have a disproportionate effect on the Black and LGBTQ communities, especially here in the South. By the conclusion of my keynote, I hope to inspire you to also stand as a witness to this issue. And so before I share a little bit about my journey, I just want to preface that I am from the South. I am from Louisiana, from Shreveport. I am currently living in New York City, where I have spent a decade doing the work around bringing awareness and education to HIV criminalization, what it is and what it does. And also to decriminalize the laws here in this state. And so I've spoken to many audiences over the past decade, many, but not many faith-based or faith communities. Maybe have had one experience or two where I've been invited. And so I definitely come from church. I sang in the choir. My grandparents were deacon and deaconess, and so there's a Mahalia Jackson song that talks about I sing the oh God, I'm forgetting it now. It's about living the life that you sing about. And so, although I am not a preacher or a preacher's kid, the songs that I sung in the choir or things that I do the examples of how I try to live my life today. And I'm glad to be in this space because you all have affirmed a lot of things that I grew up with and believing. But at some point, things changed for me. I've evolved since I left the South, and I've seen many things wrapped up in injustice. And I had to ask the question, where's the church? Where's the church to address these needs that people are having? Of course, we deal with sin and all kinds of things. We view that, but at the same time, we are still here human, in our human capacity on earth and suffering. and going through so much that this can't be the way that God intended. And so being here today, you all have really affirmed, given me an answer to a question that I kind of been carrying. Where is the church? Where is our faith? And I think we are in alignment. I feel definitely in alignment in this space, even though I don't know many of you. But it's good. It's really good. So to share a bit about my journey, in October, it will be next month, it will be 21 years since I was diagnosed with HIV. However, 15 of those years were marked by a life-altering experience when I was criminally prosecuted under Louisiana's so-called HIV exposure law. And so in 2009, which is 15 years ago, I was convicted in the court of law there in my hometown. And to give a little background, I also worked at the Court of Appeal for the state of Louisiana. So it was a bit of an ironic experience to find myself on the other side of the law. And so I was convicted because I was charged with intentional exposure to the AIDS virus in that state for allegedly not disclosing my HIV status to a partner. And from there, I ended up going through many court hearings until I was convicted in 2009. What I didn't know is that I had to register as a sex offender. Yes, as a sex offender. And that changed everything because that was not something that I was expecting. And so to make a long story short, I challenged that issue about having to register, and I ended up having to go back to court, and the court said, oh yes, you do have to register, but you also are supposed to go to prison. And so I was initially given a 2-year probated sentence, but because they sentenced me incorrectly with the probated sentence, I ended up having to go to prison. And so I ended up doing 6 months in a South Louisiana prison, and also still having to register as a sex offender. And I say that because if I remained in this state for the 15 years, I would technically be coming off the registry, not automatically, of course, because that's not how they play this game. It is something that I have to initiate. But because I've since moved from this state in 2012, and I've moved around and have been compliant, it's like I've started over the process all over again. And so in New York, I didn't realize that as I was registering to being compliant, right, thinking that, oh, if I just do the 15 years and comply where I am, I should be fine. But what I didn't know is that I did not get credit. I am not getting credit for being in another state. So by me registering in that state, I'm literally starting over the clock. And so I technically have 10 more years to be on the registry, except in the state of New York, even though I was not prosecuted in that state. But because of how the laws work around sex offender law, that's just the way it is. And it's not the way it should be, but that's just the way it is. And I'm sharing these things because I am a person living with HIV. I am black, I am gay. And I just want to live my life in a way that show people that what I've gone through, and to show people what this country will do to you, what these state laws will do to you. And so I'm sharing that. I'm supposed to be working this. Is it the green button? Oh, that button. Okay. So yeah, as you can see here, that's the sex offender on the Louisiana driver's license. And so I wanted to show people just the examples of what headlines could look like. When this happened to me, there was not any headlines. And so HIV criminalization can happen to a person and it not be something that's broadcast. But since then, in my advocacy, I have been very transparent about who I am, what I am, and what I've been through for the sake of people being able to see what happened. So I just wanted to share some of what those headlines could look like. And so, so the experience of stigma and discrimination that ensued were almost unbearable, of course, especially as I was forced to register as a sex offender. However, my faith provided the strength to turn my pain, my misery, into ministry to speak out, not only for myself, but for all the individuals living and now aging with HIV who might encounter similar injustices. However, I've also turned things around because the good thing about God is that he has a way of making a way out of no way. And I definitely didn't see how I was going to continue to live my life beyond this criminalization experience, because being black in the South, it's like a chain and ball. You know, there's just no way of breaking through or breaking those chains. And so I figured that if this is what the labels I'm going to have, if this is the lot that I have, then I'm going to do the best what I can with it, and show people the evidence of what God can do. And I'm boasting because I normally don't boast about the things that God has done for me. I just continue to live and hope that people see that, and I do my best to be a blessing to other people. But today I decided to do it in this space because, yeah. Because God does get the glory for all the things that he's definitely has done in my life. And I just wanted you to be able to see it, that when I left Louisiana to co-found an organization, the Zero Project, which has lasted a decade, and now it's under new leadership. And also I have become pretty popular in a way of speaking about this issue. And so it's taken me to places all over the world. I'm starting my own thought leadership platform now to speak more, to do trainings, to talk about this issue to more audiences beyond those of us that live in the HIV, LGBTQ community. You know, it's kind of like the word, you know, this the heaven and earth won't pass away until the word, till the gospel spreads to preached to every end of the world. So that's how I see it. And so here in Louisiana, I also co-founded the Louisiana Coalition on Criminalization and Health. So although I don't live here in this state, I at least left a little project here for people who are interested to be involved on this issue. And they are doing a great job in organizing and bringing awareness to this issue and to the state legislature. And so I currently am chair of the Council of Justice Leaders with the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation. I've just wrote becoming an author. So I'm doing some things. I'm not out here continuing to break the law because, again, being on the sex offender registry or being a convicted felon, this is intentional. All of this is by design. And it's a shame that it has to happen on the backs of people who are already vulnerable, living with a disease. You're criminalizing a disease to make it seem like we are a predator, or monsters, or viral vectors of disease, and that is not the case. And the reason why I talk about this, because I know many people have certain feelings about HIV and their relationship to HIV, and we're all entitled to that, including myself. However, what we're wrestling with is nothing compared to this system, these criminalization laws. The greatest manifestation of stigma is to have it enshrined in the criminal code, the greatest manifestation of stigma. And it's not just for a month, this is a lifetime. This is a lifetime. So you best believe that with everything that God has given me in his image, I'm going to use it to expose the injustice that happens to my people and to anyone that is being criminalized based on their HIV status. And so in my mind, this is what has to be done. Yes, ma'am.
Can you repeat that one more time? The greatest manifestation
Of stigma is have it enshrined in the criminal law. Yeah. So since that time, I've had the privilege of working with incredible organizations, communities, and networks around the world, but the South remains close to my heart. It's where my journey began, and it's where the fight against HIV criminalization is most urgent. And I'm going to talk about, move us into understanding HIV criminalization in the South. So look at that map. It's a very nice map. It's one of my favorite maps from the Center for HIV Law and Policy. It gives you a snapshot of what HIV criminalization looks like today. So it has definitely been updated. So this is what it looks like today. So HIV criminalization refers to the use of criminal laws to prosecute individuals living with HIV for behaviors that would not be criminalized if the person was not living with HIV. For example, for consensual sex or exposure to body fluids. And what I mean by consensual sex, meaning that if you engage in consensual sex without prior disclosure, you could be criminally liable. And then there's instances where people have been prosecuted if if a person living with HIV spit came out of their mouths, which we know HIV cannot be yeah, you cannot contract HIV through spitting and biting. And so, but believe it or not, as you all know, we are still wrestling with these things with people who continue to think in the way that they think. So these laws are often based on outdated science and deep-seated stigma, and they do nothing or have not done anything to prevent the transmission of HIV. Instead, they perpetuate fear, discourage testing, and disproportionately impact marginalized communities. So you're probably wondering, well, how did this happen? How did this start? So these laws originated during the height of the AIDS crisis in the 1980s and early 1990s. And so in 1980, I was a baby. So a lot of this history I've had to learn over the years. And so there's just more and more that I continue to learn, which is a good thing because we need to know where we came from in order to understand why the conditions are the way they are today. So the 80s and 90s, when fear and misinformation about HIV was rampant. So I also challenge people, think about where you were. You know, what were you doing? Many of you probably learned about HIV when Magic Johnson said his thing in, what, 91, I believe? So I always like to challenge people, like, think about where you were, what was going on? What were you thinking and feeling at that time? So rather than addressing the epidemic with compassion and understanding, lawmakers chose to criminalize people living with HIV, equating HIV to be the criminal behavior. Well, I'll just go on and I'll preface. So in the book, Punishing Diseases, sociologist Trevor Hoppe dives into the motivations behind states enacting HIV-specific criminal laws, outlining 4 key factors that drove these decisions. And I'm going to just share with you what those things are, because typically here I would say, oh, it was the federal government, they provided an incentive to states to show that if they could address transmission, that they would get funding, you know, for prevention. Makes sense, right? However, that's like my general state. That's mostly what we say, but I just wanted to break it down for you a little, give you like the 4 reasons that Trevor explains the reasons why this happens. First, prosecutors attempted and failed to use general criminal law, such as assault or attempted murder, to punish HIV-positive defendants. But a series of high-profile acquittals and dismissals drove many prosecutors and members of law enforcement to conclude that HIV-specific criminal laws were necessary. So if you're going to charge someone or convict them under general criminal laws, you have to prove that they had intent. And so that was pretty hard, because just because a person's living with HIV doesn't necessarily mean that they're trying to actually transmit the virus to you. You have to prove that their mindset, that's the mindset that they have. And so, so they couldn't really hold anyone under the general criminal laws. Second, the numerous reports from the mid-1980s revealed an organized aggravation among police and prosecutors confronted with sex workers who had tested positive for HIV. So prosecutors, police, and media organizations cried out for HIV-specific felony prostitution penalties. And so we have police and prosecutors who are aggravated because they felt like that when they arrest sex workers who happen to be living with HIV or who tested positive for HIV, that they would get out of jail, I don't know what, 30 days or whatever the law was when they arrested people who were sex workers. And so they got tired. They got tired of seeing the same people on the streets. And so that's where the organized aggravation comes from. And what does the media do, like they always do? They're putting editorials from coast to coast, stating, you know, oh my God, this has happened and that is happening. Something should be done. This should be done. So that's where, again, just emphasizing the organized aggravation of what was going on at that time. Third, some states began to consider criminalizing HIV as a necessary measure in response to the decriminalization of sodomy or sodomy laws, a move that some believe would lead to an explosion of new HIV cases. So think about this. So they were not enforcing the sodomy laws as much as we was moving into the 80s and 90s. And so I see HIV criminalization as a proxy to continue to criminalize gay people, to continue to criminalize sex workers, to continue to criminalize injecting drug users. And so here, again, they're conflating and sensationalizing these experiences and literally exploiting this epidemic at this time. And fourth, The fourth reason, a Republican state representative from Illinois and a member of Ronald Reagan's Presidential Commission on AIDS, uh, they consider this person to be lawmaker zero, worked with an influential lobbying organization to leverage her institutional networks, helping to disseminate a model statute to dozens of states across the country. And so as you can see, the dark red represents states with HIV-specific criminal laws. And that's a result of this model legislation that just rolled out across the country. I mean, what is the odds that all states will have the similar laws? Like, how does that just happen? So that's what I mean. This is by design, is intentional. And they did it off the backs based on fear and ignorance. That is not how you do, this is not good governance. This is not how you do business. So basically but it's business for them, but it basically exploiting this epidemic to create laws, and we know what that means around mass incarceration. HIV criminalization is just another way to criminalize black bodies. It's just another way. And again, that is not how this is supposed to work. So I just wanted to share with you that while the country is in panic, similar to how we experienced COVID, thank God they didn't create COVID criminal laws, but it's similar. It really is similar. It's very parallel. The country's in going through a lot in terms of how this virus is spreading. And these people want to create criminal laws, while everyone else, especially in the black community, are trying to figure it out, trying to take care of their loved ones, trying to deal with the stigma and the shame, so on and so forth. But these people felt the need to create criminalization laws, HIV-specific criminalization laws. And so the light orange represents, the darker orange represents states that have prosecuted people under non-HIV specific laws or general criminal laws. And then light orange represents states with sentence enhancements. So that means that if you were convicted of any other type of charge, that if you just happen to be living with HIV or are positive, then you could be, your sentence would be enhanced. So, so if it was a year, then you'd probably be enhanced to, I don't know, 5 years, 6, whatever the number is. Yes, ma'am.
What do the stripes mean?
The stripes, so some states are HIV specific, dark red, but they also will prosecute you under general criminal laws for, if you have to read the small print there. So some states, although they are HIV specific, they do criminalize under general criminal laws, especially if you have, or I don't know, stacking charges or what have you. And then there's some states, if you see the, that may require registration as a sex offender. So of course, Louisiana is one of them, Arkansas, Tennessee, so on and so forth. And so I just wanted you all to really see what the laws look like across the country. And really, you mentioned it earlier, the layering of maps on top of each other. Many of you probably have seen the map about the prevalence of HIV. And so think about that map and then overlay this map on top of it. So it would literally match up. And so, yeah, that's what it looks like. Right, the gray states are laws, states that have no law as far as I know. Yeah. Right, because there's a few that do other communicable diseases, like I want to say hepatitis, but I don't know them by heart, but there's a whole nother map for those. So, but true, it's important to know what's going on in your state, but also other states. So just look around. As you can see, some states are very similar. All right, so the history of the South involve a pattern of using fear with political and cultural narratives as well as media influences to justify policies and state laws that ultimately harm rather than help marginalized communities. HIV criminalization, as I said, is another tool in this legacy, disproportionately targeting Black, queer, and low-income individuals. And this is a failure of public health and the legal system. This is often accompanied by public health and legal systems which control and oppress our communities, inflicting more serious harm than good on individuals and community groups. And so I want to show this, emphasize this here, because this is social inequities and it is a human rights violation in many ways. This is research from the Williams Institute on HIV criminalization and race. And as you can see, Black Americans are more likely to be arrested for HIV-related offenses. And so how I want you to read this is, look at the blue, which represents the percentage of people, Black people living with HIV in a state, which many of us are probably familiar with that. And then the light orange represents the number of people who are, I'm sorry, the number of Black people living with HIV. Number of Black people in the state is the blue, I'm sorry, the percentage of Black people in the state. And then the light orange represents the percentage of people who are Black living with HIV. And then the dark orange represents the number of Black people living with HIV who have a HIV-related arrest. And you see how the numbers increase, how disproportionate it is in those particular states. I wish we had Louisiana on there. And I would just say for Louisiana, 91% of the HIV arrests were Black men. So if that gives you any indication. And it gets even worse for the sex offender registry, that 3/4 or 75% of the Black men that are on the registry are only on there because of the HIV. Only because of the HIV. And that could definitely be me, of course. Black Americans are, if you look at the bottom, Black Americans are also more likely to be convicted of HIV-related crimes. And so the conviction rate is really high in these particular instances. So I tell people, if you're going to bring charges to some people, you need to think twice about it, because once you do it, you cannot take it back, especially if you live in the states that have the HIV-specific laws, because prosecutors really, and district attorneys really want to make an example out of us. And so let's not give them one. So the same thing as happening there with the HIV-related arrests, you can see the same thing is happening for Black Americans that are also more likely to be convicted of HIV-related crimes. So it's the same sort of pattern of disproportionality that's happening. And so this is research that was done by the Williams Institute, which is very good, because when we started out in this work, we didn't have this research. And so it's been really, so only thing that I hate that I can't break it down to say how many people are LGBTQ, that's will require more work, but it also shows us how law enforcement processes us in. They don't even try to acknowledge us as full human beings, let alone our identities. And so, but we know. And so what I love about the Williams Institute reports is that they provide the things that we already knew. We just didn't have the data to back it up, but now we do. And now they've done several reports of states on HIV criminalization. So if you're interested in about Louisiana, you can definitely go online, type it in, and also other southern states as well if you want to see how they fare. So that's a good thing. We didn't always have that. So as it currently stands, a person living with HIV in the US can be prosecuted for not disclosing their status before engaging in sex. This can happen even if they use a condom or in treatment with antiretroviral therapy and undetectable and incapable of passing the virus through sex. And if the seronegative partner is using PrEP, which protects people who use it from acquiring the virus. So they're not even considering the science. They're not even caring about whether you are in care. Honestly, it doesn't even matter if you disclose. And I know many people think, well, if you disclose, you should be good. No, not necessarily, because they can use that to say, oh, well, you are in fact knew that you were HIV positive, but it doesn't really matter. That's the gotcha. That's more of the gotcha, and they use us, community, to do that back and forth, to play that gotcha game, while they gain our Black bodies by arresting us and prosecuting us and putting us in prisons. And so I'm not interested in doing their work for them. They're supposed to be providing ways for us to manage this chronic condition, but instead they're not. Prevention, you can't do prevention and prosecution. You gotta pick one or the other, but they're trying to do both. However, they're not supporting prevention in a way that they should, because they're saying, well, we have these laws, so that means we won't have to give as much money to prevention, or we won't have to do this or do that. We don't have to support housing, we don't have to support education, you know, all the things that we feel like people need in order to have a better quality of life. They're more interested in continuing to keep the status quo and using these laws and using us to do that work. So despite scientific advancements that have transformed HIV from a death sentence into a manageable chronic condition, it is is today a prison sentence, and the law remains stuck in the 80s. So today, southern states continue to enforce these laws even as our understanding of HIV has evolved. So I tell people, you know, they talk about AIDS as a life sentence, but today, you know, a felony conviction is a life sentence. Because as I said, this is, once you're convicted, that you carry that for life. And they consider this to be a sex crime, to justify them to be able to put it on a sex offender registry. Because some people are like, why does this happen? Doesn't even make sense. So not only that, HIV criminalization also works against ending ending the epidemic. And I just want to take this moment to give my little 2 cents. We are not ending the epidemic for people who are living with HIV. We're already living with it. So if we're ending the epidemic, it's not for me, it's not for us, it's for people who are not living with HIV. And that's fine. Like, I don't want don't want new transmission, don't want new diagnosis. I want people to stay negative, because the beauty of this is that we have the tools that we need. Everybody has what they need as far as the medications or the treatments. It's there, but we need the access, right? We need access to these things. So it's just not enough for them to be there, but people can't reach them and use them. And also, people need to be informed about it. They need to be told PrEP is available for them, that these things are available for them. So there's work that's the work that needs to be done in terms of educating people about what's available to them. Because many of us can look back and know that there was a time that these things were not even thought of for us. And so now that they are available, let's make sure that people who need this know about it. So the Center for Disease Control and Prevention asserts that although HIV remains a threat in every part of the U.S., certain populations and parts of the country bear the burden, signaling where HIV high-impact prevention efforts must be focused. Yet these national plans advise state governments to reform and repeal HIV criminalization laws and practices, but they do not provide the resources or requirements in their respective plans. Also, the Ending the HIV Epidemic does not require its priority jurisdictions to address HIV criminalization in their plans, leaving it up to each jurisdiction to decide for themselves whether to address their HIV criminalization laws. So I showed you the map, and many of you probably are familiar with the jurisdictions are. I don't know them all, but if they're not given resources or requirements on how to address to address HIV criminalization, I mean, if I showed you the map, why would they? You know, because it's in their best interest to want to continue to use this as a way of controlling people, yes, incarcerating and controlling people. And so HIV criminalization is a barrier. Because what's the point of doing prevention if you're going to turn around, get people get them tested, get them to care, get them undetectable, if that's possible or not, and only turn around to criminalize them? What's the point? You might as well just criminalize everybody, or just don't criminalize anybody at all. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm. Yeah, just monitoring you, but it's really controlling. Yeah, that is so unnecessary, but because you're so close, they just want to make sure that you're just, you know, that you might just happen to go get tested one day and find out that you're positive, so now they really gotta watch you, you know. And so I'm glad you caught that. And so now I think that you understand, you're making the connections. And I'm not saying that, God forbid, I hope you don't contract HIV if you're not living with HIV, but these are the things, these are the tactics. If you're there based on a drug experience, why does HIV testing or needs to be a part of that? Like, what does that have to do? Yes.
Because they connected to. So was it a usage conviction or a selling? Were you selling drugs or using? Well, whichever one it was, whichever one it was, they connected to HIV. Okay, and I know this because I was a drug dealer. So when I was, that was my VC lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
VC lifestyle.
Yeah.
So when that happened and they knew I was positive, they sent people to my house to
Wow.
tell me, to inform me that if I have sex with anyone and I don't let them know that I would be convicted of a sex crime and that I would be locked up for life.
So, see, these are the games that they're playing. So, thank you both for sharing that. This is a great example where I want you to see how this plays out in other ways. It's not just sometimes always the typical. Yes, ma'am.
Also, because of my positive status, I faced all kinds of rejection, and I had to find ways to tell people that I was positive, whether it was someone that I was intimate with or wanted looking to be intimate with, or just building new relationships with, right? Because they, the way that they had it was like, if you don't tell them, and let's say somebody turns around and lies on you, that could be a, that could lead me to a conviction as well.
Yeah. So it's a very nuanced issue. It's not always the way that you think it is. It's very nuanced. So that's why it's important to hear about this and then start having conversations about it. And just like things that were mentioned earlier today, we need to have these conversations because if we're going to attack each other around it, we might as well talk about it. At least be straight with it, and not just always about someone disclosing. Because if we want people to share their status, because I try not to use disclose as much because it's so overused and it just doesn't have real meaning. If we want people to share their status, then we need to make it legally safe for them to do that. And unfortunately, it is not legally safe to do that. So I want folks to know that it's not legally safe to do that. And I'm not saying people should not disclose. In fact, we want to disclose. We want to share because we need the support. We need the love and all the things. But it's just not legally safe because either you will be killed or you will be convicted and charged with a felony. And that's just extremes, from one extreme to the other. So where do we stand? Now I'm talking about the role of faith communities in ending HIV criminalization. And I feel like I don't have to say this to this room other than to say, talk about HIV criminalization. And all the things that you talk about HIV criminalization, because with all that you all shared today, I mean, you all understand you know how to share. You know how to talk about, because we're talking about faith, right? And people being able to come into spaces, be who they are, and we need to talk how we need to talk about that and add this to the list because again, this all intersects. It all goes in the pot. So I feel like I have to like preach to the choir on this because you all get it, and really that's what it comes down to. Is just really having a conversation about this, and we know that this is not talked about in churches. At least I have not been in a church where I talked about it. I'm trying to think. No, I haven't. So, so it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity. So my call to action, so I'll just do those, is faith communities must educate themselves about the realities of HIV criminalization. We can't afford to stand on the sidelines while our brothers and sisters are unjustly prosecuted. Faith leaders have a moral obligation to speak out against these laws and advocate for their repeal. That is all I'm doing. I'm speaking out. That's all I've been doing for a whole decade, speaking out. So it doesn't take much. We must also work to create inclusive and affirming spaces within our congregations where people living and aging with HIV can find support and acceptance without fear of judgment or discrimination. And I add the aging part in there because that's really where we are. A lot of people living longer. I am 45, 21, almost 21 years. And so I'm a long-term survivor. And so I'd hate to see someone in their 60s, 70 having to be faced with criminalization. It's not a good look for our lives at all in any kind of way. But if these laws are still there, the 2 million people, or the 2 million people that are living with HIV are subjected to these laws, and they don't really look at how you came into your relationship with HIV. You're going to be subjected to these same laws. So this is something to keep in mind. So, ending HIV criminalization will require collaboration, so we can build partnerships. Let me see, build partnerships. Faith communities can play a pivotal role by partnering with advocacy groups, legal experts, people living and aging with HIV to push for policy change. Together, we can dismantle these harmful laws and replace them with policies that truly protect public health and uphold human dignity. And I think I have a few slides, a slide here with some entities that I'm connected with, including myself. So I'm just going to do a plug. But the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation has their National HIV is Not a Crime campaign. Then there's the Health Not Prisons Collective, which is the Zero Project, which is the Positive Women's Network, Transgender Law Center, Counter Narrative Project, and the U.S. People Live with HIV Caucus. So together they are the Health Not Prisons Collective, and they tackle the issue of HIV criminalization here in the U.S. And I'm just a part of all these things, and of course I'm happy to partner to bring trainings or do workshops, speak about these things. Okay. And then there's also the Williams Institute with their reports, and the Center for HIV Law and Policy. So between those two, research and policy, you can partner with them, and they can pull, whatever type of policies, at least from a faith-based perspective. I don't know if that's been done yet, and I think you all may have your own things out there. But that's just an idea, right, of ways to partner. Oh, and my other points were around advocacy and policy change. Faith leaders have a unique platform to influence policy and opinions. Let me go back there. Yeah. By speaking out against HIV criminalization, you can shift the narrative, and that's what needs to happen. The narrative needs to change because, again, we're out there looking like monsters and predators, and that's not what we are. And pave the way for legislative change. This may involve meeting with lawmakers, writing op-eds, or mobilizing your congregation to take action. And that is where, when you build partnerships, you can work with the advocacy organization, and we can come in and help support or partner with providing opportunities for connecting with your congregation and getting people to mobilize. So support and compassion. Finally, we must ensure that our faith communities are a place of refuge for people living and aging with HIV. This means offering support, understanding, and compassion without judgment. It means standing with those who have been criminalized and advocating for their rights. And what I'm speaking to really is people who've been prosecuted, people who've been convicted, because you think about the things that we go through as on a normal basis as Black people, as queer people, and to add HIV criminalization on top of that, going through the system and what it does to you and what it does to families and just people's livelihoods, they need a lot of support and compassion to get through it. Yeah, so there's that slide. So I provide some strategies that you can do: organize HIV education workshops and seminars, participate in campaigns, do panel discussions for advocacy and policy change, educate and mobilize congregants for legislative advocacy. I would love to see that, especially in Louisiana, as well as other southern states. And again, support and compassion. You never know what people are going through. Some people have committed suicide based on their criminalization experience, because again, once you're out there in the media, this whole narrative around you, and people know nothing about you at all and nothing about your status, all you're seeing, are you being looked at as someone who is intentionally spreading, as people say, spreading or transmitting HIV, and that's so not the case. This is such a nuanced issue. So these are ways that moving faith forward, these are some strategies for change, and I'm happy to work with anybody on ways that we can integrate or incorporate this into the work that you're already doing on the ground. And these are some ways of education around this issue. I am on the Global Advisory Panel for the HIV Justice Network, which is an international advocacy group for HIV decriminalization. And they have the HIV Justice Academy. And so you yourself can go online to this course, which is free, and learn about it, this issue, on your own, at your own pace, on your own time, anytime. And so it provides everything you need to know on action toolkits about all the issues, topics within this issue. And so I highly encourage you to be curious about it, check it out. It's at academy.hivjustice.net. It's real easy, it's not hard. So again, you can take your time, and if you just need some help with it, you can always reach out to me. I'm happy to work with you on it. We also have the HIV is Not a Crime National Training Academy. This is our 6th installment. It's going to be in North Carolina at the North Carolina State University. I want to say either in May or June. I'm not quite clear yet. They just came out with where it's going to be, but we don't know the dates just yet. And so that is something that you can tune into. That we provide scholarships. We pay for your travel, for your registration, but you stay on a college campus. And so you will sleep in the college dorm, on the college beds, if you remember how that felt, if you were able to attend college. It's a great time. We usually have up to 300 people attend, all people living with HIV, and we come and we strategize on how to address this issue in our state. And so if you're curious about this, happy to talk with you to either connect you with a coalition in your state or find out ways that you can connect with entities that are involved. We also have the HIV is Not a Crime Awareness Day. I think this is our 3rd year. It is now global. It was just US specific, but now it's a global awareness day. And so, yeah, so it's a great thing that happens every February 28th. So it's a day that you can educate your congregation, your people, your community on this issue. And of course, I'm always available as a resource around education. So as closing thoughts, as people of faith, as people of faith, we are called to love, to serve, and to seek justice. Ending HIV criminalization is not just a legal or policy issue. It is a moral imperative. We must move faith forward in the South, challenging the stigma and discrimination that have plagued our communities for far too long. It's 40 years, people. The main gaps and challenges remaining in the HIV response are, however, mainly due to a continued failure to uphold human rights, especially the rights of people living with HIV. Therefore, we must proactively commit to creating an affirming human rights environment for people living with HIV by eliminating HIV criminalization. And so my final call to action is that I invite each of you to reflect on your own faith journeys, as you all have sort of challenged me to do today as I was sitting here, and consider how you can contribute to this movement. Together, we can create a South where all people, regardless of their HIV status, are treated with dignity and respect. So let's move forward in faith with hope, determination, and the belief that change is possible. And in fact, it really is. And I didn't include the states that we've had significant changes in. There's at least a dozen of them. Illinois just repealed their whole law 2 years ago, I want to say. And so it is possible. At least 10 years ago, we didn't have any states, and now we have at least over 12 states with one repeal, or a couple of repeals. But so that means we still have more work to do in some of those states. The political reality requires that you go as far as you can possibly go, and then you get that win, and then you come back and you do it all over again until it's done. And so, yeah, I think that's all I have. But thank you so much. If there's any questions, I'm happy to, or reflections, I'm happy to answer them. Oh, well.
Thank you so much, Robert. You never cease to amaze. Robert is absolutely amazing. We do not talk much about HIV criminalization. I know that we at HRC work with the coalitions. We try to tackle it from a federal and also state level. But I agree with you. We do not talk much about that here, you know, or I should say around our faith communities, because we could really be very supportive. But the question, you mentioned something earlier about HIV criminalization, and because the courts or those that are making the decisions don't believe in science, okay? This is not a trick question, but for us that have worked in the field and understand that pharma, who also possess some of the scientific data, so think about the PrEP, the PEP, the antiretroviral medications, U equals U, and you just go on and on. How are the pharma, whether that's Gilead, ViiV, Janssen, all of them, government affairs, how do they link in this conversation to help you and those that are fighting against HIV criminalization?
That's a very good question. I can't recall if I had a government official from any of those pharma involved. They probably have been in the room, but not as vocal. I will say, as a side note to that, is that Gilead has funded a lot of the HIV decrim work at a as a community, at the community level. And so with the Health Not Prisons Collectors, as well as the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation, Gilead has funded that. There is federal legislation that's about to be reintroduced. Representative Barbara Lee, the Repeal Act, Repeal HIV Discrimination Act, she has introduced that legislation since 2013. At every Congress, and if you know how our Congresses have been over the past few years, they've not been very productive. But she has continued to do that, which is great because at some point it becomes a messaging deal, right? And so you get as far as you can get. And so that's a very good question. And I'm wondering if any of our government affairs people in pharma are mindful of that federal legislation, but I can't say that I know anyone just personally that's talking about it. So, but very good question. So that's, again, another tapped network of people that could be useful. But I will say Gilead definitely has funded a lot of the decrim work. So, yeah. Yes, ma'am. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Good evening. So I don't have a question. I just want to encourage you. When you first got up, you said that you were nervous. To God be the glory, because what the enemy thought was going to break you, it made you. And you taught me something today, because I absolutely had no earthly idea this was a thing. So when you stand in those spaces and you get behind those podiums, I want your head up, I want your chest out, because you survived. And you constantly say, I'm living, I'm aging. The ING is a forward progress. And you were created to free a nation that's dealing with the same thing. So I applaud you for your work. Continue to stand on what you believe in. And when you reach those podiums and you get those calls, don't be nervous, Robert. God ordained you to be in these places.
Oh, yeah. He's showing me over and over and over again. But I appreciate when people speak life to me. I definitely need it, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Amen. Amen. Same here on that. Speaking life. I believe that there's a waiver. Is it the 1115 waiver that we can ask for from the state? Does anybody know about that? From CRM, dealing with CRM and this state waiver?
I don't know about that.
That helps with, it may be from my notes from the from earlier today, but they were saying that there was some type of waiver that I want to see if you knew anything more about.
No, that sounds foreign to me. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Just to piggyback on the waiver that she was talking about, is expungement an option, or to have, I guess, expungement or sealed and dismissed based on it now being almost an outdated statute, because we know of the U equals U, and that's kind of what I would wonder if you've been able to approach it from that perspective.
I will
talk
say,
about criminalization.
good question. Thank you for the clarification. I will add, this is a felony. You would think that if you're a first-time offender, that you will, like you can have your record expunged. I'm just going to say for Louisiana, and this probably is for the other states as well, they consider it a sex crime. And so it is even more challenging to get an expungement, because the thing is, you got to find a right lawyer that wants to deal with this, which requires money. However, unless there's some type of special law group that's really like, hey, we want to get in and do this, God bless them. God bless them to do it, because that's what it's going to take, that really intentionality. But just for an individual themselves, and just finding the right attorney to want to touch this because of just, the nature of this, HIV, sex, and how people feel about crime or not wanting to, you know, wanting people to be punished and so on and so forth because of how they think about things. It's really challenging. And even for myself, in Louisiana, they have this loophole that even if you did get a pardon by the governor, you still have to be on the registry. So they find ways to, to keep you locked in. So, but good question. Thank you.
I served on the Ohio Health Modernization Movement before I retired a couple of years ago, which is the movement to work on the HIV criminalization laws in Ohio.
Yeah,
And if you
Ohio.
want to check out the resources there, it's ohiomodernizenow.org. We had a lot of conversations about what our strategy would be before we developed legislation that we're trying to get through the legislature. And we determined not to repeal the laws because there was some fear that repealing them would create a vacuum. And then when there's a vacuum, really worse things can sometimes fill that vacuum. So instead, they have been working kind of on more of a comprehensive overhaul of how health criminalization happens to basically render them powerless. That's been kind of the approach. But really concerted efforts to work with the various prosecuting attorneys' offices and legislative offices, and to try to get everybody on the same page about moving forward. It's not been accomplished yet. It's a challenging state to get this kind of work done in Ohio. It's not purple like it used to be.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that. Yeah, it's really hard, you all, and I know I just talk about this in a way that's like, but it's really hard because you be amazed with the way people think about HIV today. Like, it's insane. So many don't know that these laws exist. Legislators, a lot of them don't know that the law is on their books. They don't know. But then you have those that have been there a while that are and somehow just don't really care about changing these laws. So you have a mixed company of legislators that aren't always on the same page about this. But the thing is, we as the people, we as community are the ones that suffer. They don't. They get to go on by their business and claim that they did something and they're not soft on crime. But we're the ones that are having to deal with it. So the community is doing the work of changing things. Luckily, they've been able to find legislative champions in the states that we've been able to change these laws. However, you really have to do work. You really have to build relationships. You really have to get to those legislative houses and really connect with those legislators and to get them to understand what we're trying to do here. And initially, they're not always on board, but some of them do see the light about this or see the injustice. And so this is what we're up against, people. And I don't know how you feel about it. I just cannot accept that with the advancements that we've made, that we have, that this is an option, that this is still considered an option. And it's not, I'm going to go out on a limb and say I don't think it's the option that we as community wants because, again, we're the ones that this is going to happen to. You may not be HIV positive today, but you could be tomorrow. Or you could be someone that's facing prosecution. So, or a loved one, yeah. So I just see the bigger picture of this, and it is challenging. But someone said it earlier today about, is this what you want to happen to you? Because that's something I always say too, so they stole my line. But again, I feel like everybody said everything I was going to say. But yeah, the question is, do you want this to happen to you if you were in this situation? So, yeah. Oh, yes. Thank you so much. Thank you for your questions. They were very good questions.
Anybody else? Well, thank you, Robert, so much for your information and wonderful message and inspiration. You're
Thank you so much.
wonderful inspiration to us. Appreciate it very much. Thank you. Well, we have come through a day. Thank you for your perseverance, your energy, your insights, your engagement, all of that. Before we go too far, Elder Kamarian shared with me a text message that she got from Nola Reddy. Is that something I should share with the group since we're about? Oh, I'm sorry, Carrie. Carrie sent it. Yeah, from Nola Reddy. The other elder. Sorry. Anyway, the Nola Reddy sent out a text that says, please remain indoors as severe weather continues throughout today. Stay off roads until local authorities say it's safe. So I thought it was our responsibility just to share that message with you since we're about ready to break for the day here, so you can make the appropriate, take the appropriate action here. I don't know about you, I had a lot of takeaways today, and I'll share a few of my own. One is that presence matters, and your presence here has mattered a great deal. It's about more than allyship. It's about being accomplices. It's about disruptive faith, disrupting stigma, discrimination, injustice, and any other barrier to health and wholeness. It's about transformative storytelling. It's about decolonization of imagination. It's about living the life that you sing about. The greatest manifestation of stigma is for it to be enshrined in the criminal code. And we go with the energy and insights that we've heard today, and I know that you could add to that list. But before we go, we want to acknowledge some folks who have made today possible. And I want to acknowledge Encore, who have been with us all day. Lucky and Chris have made sure that we've been present online all day and made sure our mics worked and our presentations rolled. And we sure are grateful for this marathon day for you. Thank you for your wonderful service to us. They're not in here at the moment, but we certainly want to thank the hospitality staff of the Hyatt who made sure that we were well fed, that had our tables set and ready for us to go, and will help with the cleanup and the reset so that the conference can continue after we depart, and we're grateful for them. I want to especially thank all of our presenters today for the wonderful and inspiring messages that you brought, the incredible information that we learned. And of course, we want to thank our sponsors, Gilead, the HIV Vaccine Trials Network, and the United Church of Christ. Their investment in this Faith Pre-Conference and in the work that happens in between makes possible this meeting and many other events throughout the year. I want to thank NMAC, who makes this space available to us free of charge and help to promote the pre-conference and the growing partnership that we have with the U.S. Conference on HIV and AIDS. I'm very much grateful to the president of the U.S. HIV and AIDS Faith Coalition, Ulysses Burley III. He was the leader and driver of our organizing process this year, and to Carrie Goodman for his being the liaison with NMAC and the planning team, and the members of the U.S. HIV and AIDS Faith Coalition, many of whom are with us today. And to all of you who showed up in person, and to all of you who showed up online, your engagement and energy of your spirit made today a wonderful day for us. Thank you in advance for your witness during the USCHA. If you have one of these lanyards for your name badge, I want to invite you to put your USCHA registration card on there so that people know that faith is in the house as you move about during the course of the conference. And thank you in advance also for the work that you're going to be doing when you go back to your communities as we move faith forward in the South and beyond to end the epidemic. Thank you and God bless you, and I invite Bentley to come forward to offer our final blessing as we move from this place.
So I would invite us all, if you're able and willing, to stand And if we could, someone said energy quite a few times today, if we can kind of get together maybe and circle ourselves, each one touch one. It's been a lot of sitting, but a lot of good word today, amen? So we can get you out if you're leaving, home safe, all of that good stuff. Because we're going to be protected, amen? We are protected people. Thank you. All right. Let us center our hearts. Holy One, we are just blessed people. Despite the challenges that we face on the daily, when we entered our mother's womb, we knew because you knew what the path would be. And while we may not have liked it, we still thank you. Thank you for the growth. Thank you for the ways in which we can be a witness. Because there are many people who don't have community, many people who are alone, many people fighting criminalization, many people fighting stigma and discrimination, many people fighting to live because life can be hard. But there's light. There is always light. Whether Jesus is your God or Allah your God, or Jehovah is your God, or Buddha shows you the way, we thank you for all the ways you draw us to your spirit. Be with us as we go out into the streets today. Keep us safe. Keep us dry where possible. But let us know that not only do we have each other, we have you. Not just in this moment, but until our last breath and beyond that. Because from whence we came, that is where we will turn. And for that, we are grateful. In the risen one's name we pray.